Alright, so we're back, of course, talking FF7. We're talking Rebirth. We're talking Game of the Year, whether or not Rebirth is a worthy candidate for Game of the Year, and whether or not it'll actually win it. But before we hop into that, I do want to add, for those that might be interested, Rebirth will be going on sale tomorrow for the Days of Play with PlayStation. It'll be the first time, as far as I'm aware, that it's gone on sale or any sort of price reduction. It'll be 25% off, which is pretty good. That's like $17.50 off or something. So it'd be like $52.50 or so if you want to buy it tomorrow, which is kind of nice for those that maybe didn't want to pay that $70, because obviously a lot of people have a problem with the $70 price tag for modern games, or maybe you're just in general waiting for a self-rebirth. That'll be happening tomorrow. Getting back on topic, FF7 Rebirth, Game of the Year. Why are we talking about this? Well, Metacritic dropped their best games this year list yesterday, and Rebirth does sit at the top of the list this year so far, right? We're towards the end of May, and Rebirth is at the top of the list with a 92 score, right? Universal acclaim, as it says on the website. So it's obviously had people talking within the community about whether or not it's going to win Game of the Year this year, so I figured I'd discuss it as well. As we've previously talked about on the channel, that 92 is a big deal because that is the second highest rated Final Fantasy ever, right? It's only behind Final Fantasy IX, which is like 94, right? 35 plus year franchise. The game just came out this year, 2024, second highest rated ever. The conversation of whether or not it's a candidate for Game of the Year, I mean, that kind of goes without saying, right? If you have a game that's like one of the best in the entire franchise, I think it's safe to say that it's at least in the running for a nomination. Even when it came to FF7 Rebirth, that game was nominated for Game of the Year. It obviously didn't win it, and that was a lower rated game. So clearly Rebirth is going to be in the running for Game of the Year. That's without a doubt. But will FF7 Rebirth win Game of the Year? That's a bit of a different topic. That said, there doesn't seem to be a lot of competition. I mean, there's some good games that have come out this year, but if you just look at like the top 10 on Metacritic, I haven't heard of like half the games almost. Me personally, I've never heard of Animal Well, Balatro, Lorelei and the Laser Eyes, and Mullet Mad Jack. But also, if you pay attention to that top 10, like 2 of the games are older, because you have Horizon Forbidden West Complete Edition, which Horizon Forbidden West obviously came out in 2022, and then the Complete Edition came out like the end of 2023 for PS5, and then this one is specifically, I think, the PC version that came out like March 21st, 2024. But that's like a several years old game. And also like Last of Us Remastered, which that does have a lot of new content, but that's still like a fucking 4-year-old game, right? So the competition isn't very steep. Those 2 games, I'm not sure if they'd be in the running for Game of the Year just because of what they are, being remasters or whatever, re-releases of games. I'm not entirely sure. But if you look at the rest of the list, there's some decent games there, but none that necessarily compare to Rebirth. Because the only real competitors on like the list, at least in the top 10, are Tekken 8 and Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth. And I mean, besides like a Smash Bros game or something, I don't foresee like a fighting game ever really winning Game of the Year unless it's like one of the greatest fighting games of all time or some shit, right? And I can't speak for it. I haven't played a newer Tekken in a while. I think the last one I played was like Tekken 6 or Tekken Tag Tournament 2 or some shit. It's been a little bit since I played some Tekken. I do like the series, but the odds of like a Tekken game winning Game of the Year, I don't know about that. I can't really speak for like the Yakuza series. I haven't really got into that. I know there's so many goddamn games and series that I never play, but I've only heard positive shit, obviously, about the Yakuza series. And then, of course, I have the new Paper Mario, which is like the 9th, highest rated game of the year so far, which it's a Mario game, so decent odds it could be like nominated at least. I don't know how likely it is, because it's a couple points below Rebirth in terms of like the, Metacritic score or whatever. But it's a Mario game. I mean, those games are always like highly rated. They always nominated, generally speaking, so maybe. And then if you venture out of the top 10, you have like the Persona 3 Reloaded, however you say it, which is like a remake of Persona 3, but I don't know how different it is. Is it like a Resident Evil 4 remake or the Resident Evil series in general? Like those games are similar but quite different to the originals, right? So I don't know how different it is. If it'd be, eligible to be a Game of the Year contender or something like that, you guys can let me know that in the comments. Venturing even further out of the top 10, you have like Dragon's Dogma 2, which is a little down the list, but the game was obviously like kind of culturally relevant for a while, and then like I don't even know where it ranks in like the meta score type shit, but like Helldivers 2 obviously came out this year and was like a massive success. I know the game had some controversy somewhat recently. I don't fully keep up with that shit because I didn't play the game, but that was like a culturally relevant game where like the world for a bit was talking about Helldivers 2. So that game could potentially be nominated as well. I don't know. And looking into like upcoming games for the year, there's not a whole lot that I see that I would think would be considered Game of the Year candidates. You have like Assassin's Creed Shadows, which we're excited for that. It's a ninja Assassin's Creed game. We've been waiting for that for a very long time, since damn near the beginning of the franchise. Obviously, in more recent years, like Assassin's Creed Origins and Up, the games have been, more well received than some other games in the past. But it just kind of depends on what they do with it. I just don't know that a Ubisoft game like that would necessarily be a Game of the Year candidate, but maybe. You also have Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 coming out, which the first game was not a very high-rated game, but I think conceptually is a fantastic game. I think it's very, very fun to play. It is just hard to kind of get around, and mechanically it's kind of weird, and et cetera, et cetera. But if they can improve upon it, because it's like a 79, I think, on Metacritic with the first game, if they can improve upon what the first game did and just make it better all around, that could be mid-80s to like the 90s, potentially, depending on how, the game is reviewed. And then you have the Silent Hill 2 remake, which my face should say it all. I highly doubt that the remake is going to be as good as the original, right? We're talking the original Team Silent. We're talking one of the greatest survival horror games all time ever. It's not a super high-rated game. I think it's like 89 on Metacritic. But still, we all know what Silent Hill 2 is. And I just don't know that the remake is going to be anywhere as good. It visually looks pretty good, but you're remaking a very iconic game. So there's a lot riding on this. But if they can somehow do something to the level of like a Capcom remake, like, Resident Evil 4 type shit, maybe we could see like a, little bit sleeper hit with that Silent Hill 2 remake. But besides that, man, there's just not really a lot of competition this year. So is Rebirth going to win Game of the Year? Probably, but it's kind of an empty win if you think about it. Don't get me wrong, dude. A win is a win, and I would love to see an FF7 game, related game, win Game of the Year. We'll take that if we can, right? But it's, there's not a lot of competition. So it's like, if it wins Game of the Year, it's like, yeah, that's not really a surprise, right? And it kind of sucks, because it'd be nice to have like an FF7 game up against other really good games and it win Game of the Year. Like that's something that I would love to see for like the third game, right? When that game comes out in however many years, whatever's out at the time, other big games, it'd be cool to see like, this game be like a 94 or 95 potentially, maybe the highest rated Final Fantasy of all time, have it stacked up against other big games like a Legend of Zelda or a Mario game or something along those lines that, tend to win Game of the Year shit, and it actually win. That'd be pretty damn cool to see. But whenever like, Rebirth is potentially winning Game of the Year in a year without any real big releases or any kind of major releases, anything that's even on its level, it's a win, but it's like, just to use like a wrestling example, like it's like, it's like you win in the match when the guy DQs himself. The guy runs up and kicks you in the dick and balls and the ref DQs him, like, yeah, you won the match, but your fucking nuts hurt. When it comes to the topic of Rebirth as a game kind of overall, I think it's a fantastic game, obviously. I think it deserves its rating. I think it's better than Remake in pretty much every way that I can think of, but it's not a flawless game. And we've talked about this a lot on the channel. Like, the open world is very good. It's better than what I was thinking it was going to be. But it's not like necessarily fun to do. The world intel shit, we've talked about this a lot. A lot of people agree with that it's kind of repetitive, the overuse of Chadley, so on and so forth. The story stuff for Rebirth is pretty good. Obviously, the ending's a little bit debatable amongst the community and whatever. But the majority of what you're doing in the world, it's not the best thing I've ever done, right? The side content, the side questing in Rebirth, I think, for the most part that I can think of, is pretty good. I can't think of any side quests where I was like, this is just the worst thing I've ever done. But like, exploration of some of the zones like Gongaga and things like that, some people have mixed opinions on. The world intel shit, obviously. The bloat of, and people don't like the word bloat when we're talking about Rebirth, but I'm going to use the word fucking bloat. But like the mini games, they got a little repetitive. They're different mini games, but it's like I get to a new zone and here's 15 new mini games I got to learn. It's like, I could have done without a mini game. We could just have like a straightforward side quest, but that'd been a little bit better. But for the most part, I think overall as a package, it's a fantastic game. But I just don't think it's like this flawless game that people want to pretend that it is. Speaking of like the side content, what the extra shit that you can do in Rebirth that isn't the story, I've seen people talking about this obviously because of the Metacritic score, Game of the Year discussion, et cetera, is people that are like adamantly defending the game. Like their defense for why it's good is that what people complain about is optional shit. The world intel stuff, the side questing, the mini game, so on and so forth. That's all optional. So like, I guess your complaints aren't valid. Which is the weirdest shit I've ever heard. For one, it's all subjective. Anyways, like, some people are going to like this minigame, some people are going to fucking hate this minigame. Some people are going to love the world intel shit, and some people are just going to be like, it's kind of repetitive, right? Like, it's all subjective, ultimately. But to say that you can't criticize a game because its optional shit isn't necessarily fun is one of the weirdest fucking defenses I've ever heard. It's so weird that I don't even know what to say, necessarily. Like, we're not allowed to, like, criticize the side content. Like, if you're, like, because the same people who are in defense of Rebirth think that the side content's good, right? There's people that love the game overall and everything about it's damn near the best thing they've ever done. And so, like, they can speak positively about the side content, but if you disagree and you say that the side content wasn't that good, well, you're wrong. You're simply wrong. And even if the stuff that we're talking about is optional in the game, you know, you're still compelled to do it because there's like exclusive materia with Chadley in these regions, and you got to go through Chadley to get the summon materials, right? You got to go through doing the Chadley shit to level up the summon materials. And you're doing side quests, you always have like a particular character with you, and completing that side quest, you get points for them on the grid to like level up their stats and unlock, you know, attacks and abilities and all that other shit, right? So you're compelled to do the optional shit, even if it is actually optional. And you can have an opinion on it, dude. It's fine. If people don't like it, they don't like it. It's not the biggest deal. I promise. If people criticize FF7 Rebirth, you wake up tomorrow and everything will still be the same. I just think that, like, as a community, we should be talking about the aspects of Rebirth that weren't, like, universally well received. You know, like the world intel shit, the exploration in some areas, things like that. So that maybe they can kind of improve upon it going into the third game. Because if they just think that, like, you know, Rebirth was just like this perfect game that just didn't quite hit like the highest mark they could in terms of like the critic scores, maybe they'll rest on their laurels and they won't, you know, go out of their way other than like add in the high wind to the game to like improve upon it, right? So like we want them to make the third game as good as possible. And how do you make it better than the second game? Improve upon it. I think that there's aspects that can be improved upon going into the third game, right? Like some of the world intel shit. We've talked about a lot on the channel for the last few months. We're going to move on from that. But like the side questing, you know, I think the side questing overall was good. But like I think leading up to like Rebirth, there in interviews, Hamaguchi was talking about wanting to do like side questing on like the level of like Witcher 3. And I mean, come on, that's a huge mark to hit. I think the questing in Rebirth was good, but like it's nowhere near the level of like Witcher 3, right? Witcher 3 is kind of like the benchmark since that game dropped for like side questing in games, right? And maybe they can get that into the third game, but like obviously I don't think Rebirth even came close to that. I think you do have some great side quests and some great side characters and so on and so forth throughout Rebirth, but it's just not like anything like, you know, Witcher 3. Witcher 3, you go into a side quest, and that side quest can be like an hour and a half long and have multiple different outcomes and payoffs that you see like 10 hours down the road when you're exploring the world and all this other shit, right? There's just so much intricacy into like the side questing within Witcher 3, where like the side quests are on par with like the main questing. Sometimes better in some ways, depending, right? So it's like, you're not quite there, I don't think, yet with, you know, Rebirth, but maybe the third game. But ultimately, those are my thoughts. Like, I keep recording and talking about more, and this turned into a completely different video. I just want to get my thoughts on the Game of the Year stuff. I think that for sure it's a candidate and almost definitely going to win. And I guess it just depends on if there's any like more surprise hits or how well some of the upcoming games are received or whatever. But for the most part, as it stands right now, I think it's like a pretty good odds to win Game of the Year for sure. But what are your thoughts? Of course, I'm not like the most well versed in like all the games that come out every single year. You know, I kind of pick and choose what games I play. So you guys can let me know if there's any other like good candidates for Game of the Year besides the ones that we talked about in this video, or the ones that we talked about. If you think there's decent odds that could win Game of the Year, what do you think some of the upcoming games odds are potentially? Anyways, that's the video. Subscribe to the channel if you guys are new. Social works in the description below. Follow me on Twitter, @DaveYT. That's it.
Used to care what people thought, but now I care more. And nobody out here's got it figured out. So therefore, I've lost all hope of a happy ending, depending on whether or not it's worth it. So insecure, no one's perfect. We spend it with no shame. We blow that like Coltrane. We in here like Rogaine, or leave it like Cobain.